What is going on, everyone? It's your guy, Cole Jackson, back here on Road Graders, bringing back together just the best darn panel of film folks you guys can get. Let's go around. Let's say hey to everybody. Starting with you, Coach Evans from Sip2Tally. I dropped all the links down below. Please go check out all the channels. Make sure you're subbed up. Coach Evans, how you doing tonight?
I'm doing great, man. I'm glad to be back. Glad to enjoy in this great football X and O, and I'm always down to talk ball. Had a great conversation earlier with Chris, and I'm looking forward to having this great conversation with you, three other distinguished football minds.
Love it. Love it. And Coach DC from all 22 films. Coach DC, how you doing tonight?
Good, man. I've never been called distinguished, so I appreciate that, Coach. It's gonna be fun, man. We just need to get a win for real. Whatever the Ravens got to do is so much conversation about style of play, offensive line. I don't care what they do. I don't care if they run 50 times or throw 50 times. We just need to win this week.
Love it. Love it. And my guy, the OG of the channel, we'll call him, Michael Crawford at A Bukhari from the Deep Cover Pod. How you doing, MC?
I'm good, man. I might literally be the oldest one here. But yeah, still rocking with Chris and Kerry on Deep Cover, with Denard on Fire Zone, and actually started a new job here recently. It's not going all that great right now, though. I took over hosting Shannon Sharp's IG Live and kind of dropped the ball early. No, I'm just playing.
I heard a couple balls got dropped earlier.
Hey, man, I'm new. I'm learning. We'll get it figured out.
I love it. I love it. So if we have any technical issues tonight, you guys know who to blame. You know who to blame.
You hear some groaning and some other stuff going on.
So what we're going to be doing here tonight, obviously we're on live, so go ahead, drop some comments down below. We'll try and pop them up. If you guys have questions, things you want discussed, try and do that. We'll probably stay in here 30, 40 minutes and just kind of cut it up. But we'll talk a little bit about the Chiefs game, obviously, and how that lends itself going into the Raiders game. I know everyone's kind of Wednesday's that transition period where you kind of move from one week into the next. So I know some people have dipped into the Raiders film a little bit, and some haven't. So we might just mostly wrap up the Chiefs, but mostly looking at, what the Ravens do? What can they do different moving forward? How can we get our toes on the field? Let's look at it that way. So one thing I want to start with, and I think it's the one thing I've been focusing on, but a lot of discussion. It's really around the offensive line, and so I kind of just want to get your guys' general impressions. One by one, see what you guys saw compared to what I saw, because this is the beautiful thing when we all do this week to week. It's just that one of us will see something completely different, and then by listening, I go to your guys' channels to kind of listen, watch, and then I'm just learning off that, and it just adds so much to the discussion. So, Coach Evans, I'm going to start with you, just kind of general impressions, pass pro, run blocking, what did you see and what are the strengths, I guess, and the areas to improve moving forward?
Pass pro wise, I think the only bright spots were, Ronnie's health. He looks to be, as healthy as he can be. Ankle flexion, knee flexion, able to drop his anchor and do things like what the old Ronnie used to could do. Maybe not on the all pro level, but to a healthy level, we don't have to worry about him as much like we in the past when he was still kind of hurt. Linderbaum is Linderbaum doing the things he needs to, except for when you're right on top of him. He still has issues with that, but that's only against elite guys. And but those other three, we still got those questions, man. I don't want to keep beating a dead horse, but Voorhees, I'm not really as worried about. I think reps will fix a lot of his stuff, but the other two guys, I got a lot of questions about. And if Roger gonna be okay, I think, but Falele, what's the issue with Cleveland and Makari? They just ain't it. But I don't gonna keep going into details. I've talked enough about those three.
I hear you there. And Coach DC, what do you think? Kind of building off that, what are you seeing? What are your kind of overall thoughts?
I'm always reflecting on things from my experience. And so like from my experience being a high school coach, we would look at teams and we would say, how much do we think they lift, over the course of 365 days? How are we ahead of them? Are we keeping pace with them? Or are they ahead of us? And just to watch the Ravens O-line against the Chiefs front 6 or 7, we looked like the O-line that doesn't lift. Now Ravens fans who maybe people who only watch the NFL are going to be like, what the hell is he talking about? These guys all lift. I'm using that as a comparison point. We did not look like we were able to dislodge people unless it was a combo block. And even then, I felt like in order for us to really dislodge someone and get them moving horizontally or laterally, it almost had to be like that delayed combo block where you kind of catch the guy by surprise. The initial combo blocks that are at the same time, I thought their interior D linemen were able to react to appropriately such that they didn't get moved. I mean, I think you guys know what I mean by the difference between those two types of blocks. I just didn't see us moving people, and that's alarming to me. On an individual level, I think, like Coach said, Linderbaum and Ronnie Stanley, I'm not worried about. If there's people out there worried about them two dudes, if they're healthy, I don't know what they're watching. The other three guys all have their own individual question marks. I think the Ravens have got to think about doing something. I know I'm probably in a different boat from some of you guys. I think that they've got to at least entertain the idea of looking at improving the offensive line outside of the building. And there's not much cap room to go around to do that. I understand. But if it's me and I'm a Ravens fan, a longtime Ravens fan, I hold you guys to a high standard. You should be exploring all options. And I think that should be one of the serious considerations.
Yeah, you highlighted one thing that I really noticed. And I mean, I got to give a lot of credit to the Chiefs linebackers too. Especially a guy like Drew Tranquill, that's kind of that safety converted linebacker, because he's even, one of those more undersized guys, right? But they were coming down hard, and like they were blowing up the gaps anytime we had pullers. Using that counter play that they love out of pistol. They used it, I think, 3 of the 4 Derrick Henry pistol runs. And they're just meeting guys at the holes and giving them nowhere to go. So I think, and that's kind of what I noticed the most about the run game was Derrick Henry did a really solid job of adding a couple extra yards running through kind of tacklers, because it didn't really feel like we had too many negative runs, but I feel like we didn't give him a whole lot to work with at the same time. Like the only play that I thought was blocked extremely well was the touchdown run. Like everybody executed and everybody got a little bit of push. And that's also coming off of a long drive where their D-line's kind of wearing down. So I think the most alarming thing for me was the lack of sheer physicality. Like I always want an O-line that is going to be a bunch of bruisers, a bunch of road graders, if you will. But if you can't, like, if you may not have the most skilled line, but if you have guys that kind of play with that physical, nasty demeanor, that's really important to me. And MC, let's go to you for your last thoughts. What did you see? What were some of your thoughts?
Yeah, I mean, I'll split it up into run game and pass pro. Run game, I don't disagree with anything that you guys have already said. Obviously, it was really good to see Ronnie look as healthy as he's looked in a number of years, actually being able to like anchor. I know I said run game, but actually being able to anchor versus pass pro. The mobility is there again. The athleticism that he's always had, what he's always been able to kind of hang his hat on, is kind of there again. Again, not going to be all pro Ronnie, but what we've seen in the last few years has been like a shell of the Ronnie that we were used to. So seeing him anywhere closer to that was good. Linderbaum's a stud. We know about that. The run game, though, I'll say that I'm willing to take a little bit more of a wait and see approach, because that group, to my knowledge, has not played together in a regular season game.
Yep.
Right. I know they got some action in, well, no, not even in the preseason. Linderbaum was hurt.
Right.
And Stanley didn't play.
Yeah. So I'm willing to give them that, because you guys all know you've coached, you've played, you do film now. That cohesiveness and that time on task together, especially when it's real, when it's live, you know what I mean? We're not talking about preseason. We talk about the starters. We talk about guys like Chris Jones. There's something to be said about that. So I'm willing to kind of, let's see what happens, in this next game and see if maybe they can take a step in the run game. Pass pro, look, the Falele, it's an experiment, right? That's how we've always talked about it on Deep Cut. It's an experiment. And Chris always makes this point about how he really thinks that Dan is a natural tackle, and space is his friend in particular at tackle. When you move him inside, that space is not there anymore. Everything happens so much faster inside.
Yep.
And so is he going to be able to adjust to the speed of the game on the interior as we're experimenting, moving him to a new position? Time will tell, but there's obviously some risk in that. We've seen that. If he's going to take some of these individual L's that he was taking, I mean, risk to your quarterback, risk to your run game, maintain a possession of the ball, all of that stuff. But last thing I'll say about the pass pro, just a context thing, talked about this on Deep Cover, because I didn't realize this. 51 dropbacks for Lamar. 7th most in his career as a full-time star.
And I remember you saying that on the podcast, and I remember thinking it was number 1 in the league this week too.
Yeah. So I bring that up just because that's an anomaly in terms of seeing him drop back that many times. 57 pass blocks. Right now, some of those got called back due to penalty. That's why there's more pass blocks than dropbacks. And how many of those guys have pass blocked that much? Right, of the guys who are new. Big Dan, I think he had like 40 something, but none at guard. Voorhees has 0 in the NFL regular season, right? And Makari, he was actually a part of some of those other games. He was in the Colts game and the Titans game where they had like 71 dropbacks, something crazy. So he had played in those games. So you got, some guys, and obviously Stanley's been a part of some of that in the past. But for the most part, as a group, those guys had not pass protected that many times together yet. So all of that context, I'm willing to kind of say, all right, let's give it a little bit more time to see if it can improve. Now, if we continue on a negative trend, it is what it is. I can't sugarcoat that. I'm always shooting these rainbows. That's how I do. But even I have a limit.
And one thing because that's a great point in terms of play selection, and it seemed like in the second quarter, I should have. This is where I miss Yoshi being around, because he always gave you the play splits by quarter. I just always had all the data. So we miss you, Yoshi. Hope you're listening. Hope you're doing well. But I'd be very interested in seeing splits by quarter, because it felt like in that second quarter it got pass heavy, but it was all screens, dunks, swing passes, because it seemed to me they were trying to just do the thing that we've seen them doing in the past, in a bad weather game, or where they can't get the run game going, where they're just trying to use the short pass game as an extension of the run, right? So, if you're using bubble screens or end arounds or swing passes to Henry, those add up, right? Those are pass attempts that I'm not saying they're run blocks, because they're not necessarily run blocks, but they're using a quick passing attack to try and get the ball moving, short yardage, create some of those efficient drives where we're so used to with Lamar Jackson. We're used to those 14, 15, play drives that span 8 minutes, and you're just kind of sitting back having a good time. So it felt like they kind of transitioned into that in the second quarter. And then my takeaway was the pass pro got a little bit better in the second half. It felt like guys settled in. The biggest thing I noticed about this pass blocking unit, and I think this was kind of in the data, if you look at it, they had one of the highest proportions of quick sacks allowed of their total, or quick pressures allowed. So basically the way I summarize it is like, they're not losing a lot of total reps, but when they lose bad, and it's noticeable, and it's resulting in quick pressure. And what we've seen in Lamar's career is that's this kind of stuff, that quick pressure is the stuff that throws him off kind of his fundamentals, right? That's when we get choppy feet, we get hoppy. That was kind of my takeaway of kind of the overall pass protection. And then looking at the run blocking, I really wasn't happy about it. I try not to be too simplistic, because you end up in a situation where you're expecting every single person to make their block. But it just like, I think you guys summarized it well. We just weren't getting that push.
I do expect every single person to make their block.
Yeah.
As a coach, I do expect every single person to make their block. That's the way O-line works.
As MC says, those defenders get paid too. But it does feel like it's just always one guy missing. And we've talked about that a little bit last week with the run game, especially in a zone scheme. That one guy missing, even if it's a different guy every play, that's what blows up your run game, right? And that's kind of what I thought the film really showed was, it wasn't necessarily the same guy over and over again. I do think our guards got their asses kicked in terms of not being able to move guys off the ball. But it just felt like they couldn't get it going consistently. So
I know you've moved on to the run portion part of it, but what's alarming for me, and why, I'm probably a little less I'm probably, my progression of thoughts with this is 1, 2, 7. And what I mean by that is multiple guys lost in pass pro away from the side where they had help. So if I'm the right tackle and I know my right guard is stepping to help to my inside and I still lose immediately to my outside, that's the area I'm responsible for right now. And I felt like I saw that happen. Well, the first rep, Rosengarten,
Yep.
I seem to remember Falele stepping to him, on that play. The one where Falele got, I thought it was the same move, the swipe. I thought Linderbaum was stepping there as well. I could be wrong there, but I know this. I saw 3 or 4 reps where we lost to the side opposite our help, which to me, the way I look at it simplistically is if I'm going to lose and I know I've got help to my inside, why the hell am I overreacting to that? And if this was again, I'm going back to high school. If I was scouting a team and I said, I see 3 different players losing away from their help, immediately to me, that looks like a larger problem than just one player. If it was, regardless of what it is, if it's a down scheme, gap scheme, what type of pass pro it is, I saw guys losing away from their help immediately. And I feel like you should be able to win for a moment there. You shouldn't overreact to that inside move when your help is already there. So maybe I didn't explain that in a way that makes sense, but that's the part that I think for me probably affords me less patience with this situation.
No, I think that makes sense. No, go ahead, Coach.
I just I wrote down 2 notes, just kind of piggyback off 2 things y'all said. Coach DC mentioned something about the weightlifting aspect earlier. He said, if teams look kind of weak or whatever. I was thinking like when you have linemen that project that they don't lift or are not as strong as they should be, those teams are normally your zone teams because you don't have to move people from the point of attack when you're trying to, gap people. You're just trying to get a hat on a hat and you got a back that can hit it and go. So, if you don't have the strongest of linemen, you don't have big, bullies that can move 3 techniques and noses out the way so you can run your gap stuff. That's normally when you have zone guys. So why was more than half of Derrick Henry's runs gaps, which that confuses me. And then when Cole said something about the protection breaking down Lamar's feet, my thing is when I'm getting instant pressure, forget mechanics. I'm trying to survive.
Yeah.
So if my feet get whatever the mechanics go out the window, just like on the last couple of plays when he realized Justice Hill was blocking Chris Jones, mechanics be damned. I'm just trying to, 1, make sure I don't get hit, and 2, make sure I try to get this ball out. So like I wouldn't even count like if you're doing plays where his mechanics were good versus bad. Some of them plays technically you can't count because you get instantaneous pressure like right now. Like the ball's getting there, he catch it, Chris Jones in his lap. That's mechanics kind of you got to have a little asterisk beside some of them.
No, for sure. Yeah, no doubt about that. I'm more speaking to the way we lost early in the game with kind of the quick win from Chris Jones over Falele, the quick win against, you start to hear those footsteps, right? So even on a clean pocket, you might get jumpy, and that's where the mechanics get sacrificed. But you're absolutely right. And I mean, that was one thing that I think Lamar Jackson did extremely well in this game was the decisiveness in the scramble. It felt very 2019-ish where he saw the lane and there was no look back down the field at one of his throwing lanes. He just took off. And I know a lot of people have been talking about number of hits, and I feel like we do this conversation every year. This is a game against the Kansas City Chiefs in a revenge game for the AFC Championship. Lamar put it all out there, and that's how he played the game. And I don't think go ahead.
What's Lamar, 27? He's 27, right?
Something like that.
Yeah.
He's been doing this since he was like, not for you, Cole, but for people who bring up he got hit 13 times. He's been doing this since he was like 10.
Yep.
I mean, he's been doing this since he was 10. I know you're not playing in the NFL when you're 10 years old or 17 or even 20. Well, he almost was, but he knows how to avoid the big hits. I know we had the one game last year where he up the right sideline. People think he got hurt for like the next week or so. You could see it, but it doesn't concern me him running downhill and getting hurt. scrambling. What concerns me is when he's moving backwards, like the JOK hit in Cleveland in 2021, I guess. Those are the situations for me. I mean, you obviously don't want him to get hit 13 times. So it's why me personally, I just usually ignore those statements. I'm not worried about him running downhill or even at angles. I'm worried about him running backwards.
Yeah, I mean, if he's the one initiating the contact, I mean, we've all trucked into someone versus gotten trucked. It's a completely different feeling to your body, right? So I'm a lot less concerned about the hits he took because he was the one, he'd get down there and you could just tell he wanted to smoke this game. And that's what I mean. Like, that's a fired up Lamar Jackson. That's when I think he's at his best.
Yeah.
But transitioning into the defensive side of the ball, because we finally got to see a full game from Zach Orr. And, I don't think you can ever glean too much from preseason. They're not going to really do anything too fancy. So I thought he had a really interesting game plan for Patrick Mahomes in the sense that, the blitz rate was pretty low. That wasn't how he wanted to play it. He wanted to kind of, get the 4-man rush after it. And I think a couple guys like David Ajabo, Travis Jones really stepped up. So what did you kind of think about the game plan for the defense? I'm going to kind of leave this to you guys because I didn't study the scheme, especially in the secondary or middle of the field quite as much as I know you guys did. So Coach DC, I'll kind of start with you. What did you see from Zach Orr? What was the good? Anything you saw that maybe perhaps you didn't like, you'd like to see done differently?
I mean, I want a little more physicality. I think that's, pretty obvious. I'm talking about from the secondary and in the inside linebacker level when you can. When you can at the NFL level, because of the rule set, you're somewhat limited at times. I thought Humphrey was the only guy out there actually competing over ground, whether that involves physical contact, hand contact, or whatnot. I thought he was the only guy out there not just ceding ground and allowing free releases and free runners, which that's what the NFL wants. And that's what a lot of fans want, right? That's what they want. They want free runners. And I thought when we disrupted Kelsey, it looked a little different. And Humphrey, I thought, was the first guy to do it. I forget which possession. I liked all the dime looks. I liked all the multiplicity looks that Coach Orr showed. I mean, on rewatch and then on second rewatch, I know this is not good. It's going to sound crazy. We gave up 7 yards per play. I liked what we did a little more the more I watched it because I liked him trying to utilize our guys in different spots. I don't know if you guys felt the same way watching the film. It sounds dumb to say because we got shredded in some situations, but I like the dime looks. I firmly believe that if we got 7 good DBs, or 6, let's use them.
You go ahead, Mike.
Yeah, I was going to say, I thought it was solid. I thought he called a solid game overall. You're going up against one of the best offensive minds in the game, the best quarterback in the game. The whole situation, opening night at their place, the whole Super Bowl ceremony thing, all of that factored into that. The context of this being his first time calling the game in the regular season. And, you could see the plan is what I felt like. And I know how everybody felt about Malik and Harrison and some of the ways that they were targeting him. But like we were saying on Deep Cover, when you look at the context of those plays, so if people have already heard this on Deep Cover, forgive me, but I'm going to regurgitate it here. He's in for 15 plays. 7 of those 15 plays are pass plays. 5 of those 7 are on first down. The other 2 are 1st and 20 and 2nd and 20. And all of those 7 were against heavy personnel, 21, 13, 12. So you can see the plan, right? First down, heavy personnel, run indicators, right?
It's your base,
so I'm gonna get my run player, one of my run players on the field. What the Chiefs do? Okay, sure. We're gonna dictate that matchup. We're gonna come out in those personnel groups on first down, run indicator. Then we're gonna go to empty. We're gonna shift, and we're gonna isolate your guy on one of our wide receivers, right? So that's the chess match. And I think if you wanted to make the argument that adjusting to that, could he have done it sooner? I'm okay with it. But if somebody wanted to make that argument, okay, that's fair because he did, right? You get to, I want to say it was like 6 minutes left in the third quarter. No more Malik from that point on, right? So I think you saw the kind of adjustment. And Harbs talked about that, about maybe them having too many groups in the plan this week on defense because of some of the substitution penalties that they had going on. And the Chiefs kind of being slick with what they were doing with their substitutions, waiting until like 18 seconds left on the clock. Helmet communication goes off at 15. So you're running people out there, calls already in the row. Of course, Rowe can change calls and make plays. He knows the defense and make checks and make adjustments. But all of that cat and mouse stuff, that's a lot. That's a lot for this to be your first time calling this game. So I look at that. I look at, okay, you give up 7 on a coverage bust. That's something you're not going to typically do, right? You're in a sudden change situation on your 14 after the fumble. You hold them to 3, right? You have another situation down there where if not for a roughing the passer on Matabike, which I'm not going to get into officiating on this, but it was called, that would have been 3rd and 20, right? If that doesn't happen. Even the horse collar on Rowe, again, not questioning it, just saying that's an extra 15 yards. Now, after a 16-yard game, now they're in field goal. They're already in field goal range. So I'm just saying there were some things there that you clean up some of these things. What was already a solid performance in my mind can be even better going forward.
I think that's a really important point, especially like we know the genius mind that is Andy Reid, and we talk about it all the time with what the Ravens can do out of 12 personnel, right? You can get out there, you can set them up in heavy, you call a shift, which I think Todd Monken did a lot of. Lamar kept doing that T sign, and then they'd shift the entire formation into something else. So, there were signs of them trying to do it. They may not be able to do it at the level of the Chiefs yet, but I think that's what they're working towards. But I think that context, when not necessarily just how much a guy is on, but what situations is he put in. And, with the Chiefs being a team it's almost kind of surprising to see how much tight end usage they use with kind of their 12 and even 13 looks when they get Noah Gray out there. And I'm forgetting the other cat's name. But they use 13 personnel. And that's a team that's kind of known for being a downfield passing team. But, that context is really important. Coach DC, what about you? What'd you see?
Well, along those same lines as what you and Mike just said, I had stumbled upon in the offseason a website. I want to say Sumer Sports. I can't exactly recall. So they give you EPA by personnel grouping. So I don't disagree with the fact that we adjusted to 12 or 13. I'm pointing out what I think is interesting data for the Chiefs. If you go back and look at the last 2 years, their highest EPA for personnel group and play type was 12 and 13 personnel pass plays. Now, the 13 personnel was a smaller sample size. So I just think that's interesting to look at stuff like that and say, okay, the perception that we would all have, whether we're a fan, a coach, or armchair analyst like I am, we think, oh, it's 12 personnel, 13 personnel, we're going to run the ball. There is some data there that Andy Reid, like Mike explained with Malik Harrison, that Andy Reid is going to those personnel groupings to throw the ball, and maybe, and I this is conjecture, maybe some of the run concepts out of there are just like I use combat sports references. Maybe it's not even a jab; it's just like a lazy jab to set you up for what I really want to do. I think I even said the same shit last time we met. But
all my jabs are lazy.
Well, I think it's almost intentional that I'm gonna run the ball with Pacheco here, but really what I want to do is I want to show you the run just enough to where you think that that's what I want to do. And I really want to get you in these situations. So the EPA, I'm not, I don't get into advanced metrics and stuff. I don't even know if that's considered advanced in this day and age, but they're the highest ones, 12 and 13 personnel pass groupings. So I agree. Zach had a lot to try to navigate, and it's not just him, man. The amount of talent that they lost from the defensive staff was obscene. What actually was there last year, we were incredibly blessed. So again, on second and third rewatch, I felt better. And I found myself even like, am I willing to say this? Like, we gave up 7 yards per play. That would drive me nuts, personally, but felt better on second and third rewatch. I watched the full length film and I was like, I feel better about a rematch with them, particularly because of what we can do on the offense side, what we know we can do now.
Now, it's like what Wink said after that 2021 game, right? However many points they gave up. And he's like, but I felt pretty good coming off the field because we stopped them when we absolutely had to stop them. Yeah. You don't want to give up that many points, but this is a different cat, right? The standard that you apply to other teams and this is a different cat right here. So, you just got to get those stops whenever you can get them and get him off the field, right? And then give your offense an opportunity. But you make a really interesting point about that EP. I did not know that, and about to what you were saying, maybe Reed is using those runs to protect those passes.
Right.
Yep.
You're right. That might be exactly why they're in there, because he wants to throw. Well, I mean, people who have followed football for a long time know that's always been the narrative on Reed, right? He wants to
Right.
throw the ball everywhere he's been, even going back
Yep.
to Philly. Remember, they used to be on his head about not running the ball in Philly. So that's always been his thing. So I just thought that was kind of an interesting thing. And, I do think that almost like with Mike McDonald, right? His first year, you kind of saw some things early on where it's like, are we maybe doing a little too much?
Mm-hmm.
We're doing a little too much, maybe. Can we dial some of this back? Just, find out what guys really do well, what calls guys are, what guys are comfortable with in terms of the calls. And then let's just lean into that. And I think as they did that during his first year, you saw them get better and better and better, because now guys can play faster.
Yep.
And carve out an identity, right? Like there is that aspect of change management. And that's why I was so surprised. I was honestly shocked going into the season with folks being like, they're just going to copy and paste McDonald's scheme. Nothing's going to change. And it's like, I don't know if people just don't understand people, but anyone that's been in football, when you got
as a man, I got to have my own little je ne sais quoi on something. I can't do the exact same thing.
No,
or the exact same thing.
Nobody in the sport.
I gotta have my own little shimmy on it, something on it.
Yeah, it could be the same system, but it's a different personality.
Yeah,
and it's a different sequencing or thought process into decision making. Like it's never going to be. And I mean, when you boil football down to its most basic, like there's a lot of people do the same stuff, right? And that's one thing that I find is one of the biggest misunderstandings. It's about how you sequence things together. That's when you get true flavors. Like the way, if you look at Greg Roman's pass playbook, it ain't that different than Andy Reid's. And I know people are thinking like, what the fuck are you talking about? But it isn't, in terms of the concepts being called, how they're applied, how they're sequenced, how motion impact. That's the window dressing that gives you unique flavor. Everything, right? Like just that chess match. So again, it's not so much that I'm not comparing Greg Roman to Andy Reid, but what I'm saying is the concepts of football aren't as complicated as I think we think they are sometimes.
All four of us, this is a cooking reference. I like to cook. I like to eat even more than cook, but I like to cook too. All four of us could get the same ingredients, same recipe, and that thing is not going to taste the same.
Exactly.
That's how it is.
Exactly.
I'm not going to cook it. I'm going to order it out.
That's just how it is, though. So I know that this system, that their defensive system in particular, it goes back a ways, right? And there's a number of guys that have been through it, but everybody puts their own spin on it, brings their own flavor to it, their own ideas to it. And Zach's not going to be any different. He's going to put his stamp on it too.
I think what Mike had to do, or what Mike did, was find out not just what he could and couldn't do, but when he could do it. And I think of that Miami game and the Bills game. I believe it was Bills 2022. The years kind of run together at this point, but I think he had to figure out what he could do and when he could do it with certain guys on the field, and that's probably where we are with Zach Orr. So again, I think it's just very interesting that in the first game he had so many different versions of nickel and dime out there configuration wise. Mike McDonald just did the same thing this past weekend with the Seahawks. You had multiple guys lining up at nickel, Devin Witherspoon playing outside corner, playing nickel, playing too high safety. It almost to me looks like they're kind of trying to give you as the offense, force you to take another 3 or 4 seconds. Okay, which version of nickel is this? And we've got that. We don't have a Devin Witherspoon, but we've got two guys that can move around in all those different spots, in Hamilton and Humphrey. So I'm interested in what he does moving forward with this versatility look and how intentional it is. I think it's extremely intentional.
Absolutely. Yeah. And moving on to kind of the Raiders. So again, I know you guys haven't quite jumped in to maybe the specifics yet, but when you look at a guy like Davante Adams, and I mean, I'm still haunted by that memory of Robert Jackson guarding Davante Adams in 2021, 2020. I don't even remember what year that was,
I think.
But we double teamed him with a bracket in the boundary and he still scored 6. So I'm always haunted by that. But how, like, defensively, what do you want to see from Zach Orr to prepare for the beast that is Davante Adams?
That front four, get after it.
That's where it starts.
that front four. Not just being on with Chris earlier and just getting a real appreciation for Owe, Ojabo, Travis, and Matabike. Them 4 jokers right there.
That's it.
The potential for them 4, and it didn't dawn on me till I was watching it with him. Them 4 can eat.
Yeah.
They can be disruptive versus the run and the pass. And just seeing Travis and Matabike push the middle of the pocket with pass rush, that thing could change worlds, with the exception of against the dude we just played.
Yeah.
Because everybody ain't gonna be able to do what Pat did versus.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
I think
Yeah, go
Adams
ahead.
is an interesting player. I don't know what the metrics or the data shows, but I saw 2 games from him last year, and I'm going to be honest with you, he didn't look the same level of athletic guy. I'm not saying that he's not going to come in here and have 8 catches for 130 and 2 touchdowns, but I think Zach Orr's going to play our coverages, and I think we're going to be man on one, which we normally are in a lot of our match or split field coverages. I think we're going to be maybe strategically at times hedging the safety over to that side, but I'm not too sure that he's going to get a whole lot more attention, to be honest with you, unless we're talking about 3-by-1 and he's the backside X, and now we can't leave a whole too much space over there. But it's going to be interesting to me. I look for Marlon to be physical with him, and Wiggins to run with him, and Stevens to try to do the same, depending on the matchup and where they are.
And that's what I was thinking, DC, is like, I want to see them throw all those guys at him and give him 3 different skill sets, 3 guys that can do things differently. Because like, you simply just can't always, with a boundary receiver, that's why they're so valuable, send all these looks at them. Like, they literally end up on a boundary, right? And you can always isolate that receiver, whether it be through motion or just, winding them up wide side of the field, as a solo X. So, I think the best thing they can do schematically is definitely get after Gardner Minshew. Don't let Gardner Minshew be the one to beat you. So, Coach Evans, you're bang on. Like, that's where you address that. You get after him with that front 4. I would like to see a little bit more creativity with the linebackers blitzing. Again, I think that's intentionally something they're not going to do against Patrick Mahomes because of how he plays against the blitz. Thank God Gardner Minshew isn't Patrick Mahomes. So, I think we're going to see a lot more creativity in the blitz game. And that's something that Trent Simpson, much like Patrick Queen did, really shines in his skill set. And, we saw it at his time at Clemson, whether it was on the edge or inside. We saw it in the preseason. So I think that's one thing that they can unlock to really get after that quarterback and limit what they can do outside in the passing game. Sending different corners at him, giving him those different looks. I think there's tremendous value in that. And that's why having so much depth at corner is such an advantage to you.
Yeah, I agree with everything you guys said. It starts up front. If you can take the run game away, and don't sleep on Zamir White. I know he ain't put up a ton of yards in that game, but if you watch that game, he had to fumble, but he had a couple runs in there. He had a 12-yarder. I want to say he had a 16-yarder that got called back because of hold. He had like another 11-yarder in there. It seemed like they were kind of doing a timeshare thing with Madison, but I think they got into more drop back stuff, and Madison was kind of the third down, back in there. But don't sleep on Zamir. You still want to address the run. You still want to try to stop that, force them to be one-dimensional. And then, like you said, pin your ears back and really get after Minshew. And then, not that a guy who's as talented and as good as Devontae is still can't get his, but it's going to be harder. It's going to be a lot harder in that situation where it's one-dimensional. The pass rush is really getting after you. And you're in a situation where you feel like you've got to drop back almost exclusively. If you can get them into that, if you can get any team, almost any team, into that kind of situation, you got to like your chances, against most teams and against most quarterbacks. But, different team. But we saw Gardner Minshew come in here last year with the Colts.
Right.
And they were able to get a dub. So,
he don't give a shit.
He gets that rap. No,
he just plays. I'll always respect that about him. People make fun of him all they want, but he slings it. And, I always appreciate someone that just plays with that fearlessness as a backup quarterback.
He took some shots this year too.
Yeah. Yeah. And then just kind of moving into getting ready for their defense. So I have a video coming out tomorrow on their pass rush. Cause the Raiders defense last year was solid, and it was almost underrated. And I think it was underrated because of the offensive problems they had. So they just aren't getting the attention nationally. You got a guy, a Max Crosby, he's a dude. Like, that is a legit all pro, and
never comes off the field.
Yep.
Still plays 100% of the
I've never
snaps.
seen someone just play 60 snaps and still have the same juice. And what I did, and I'm so thankful for this NFL Pro tool that they have now. So I grabbed all pressures that they had last game against Greg Roman's Chargers and just kind of broke down what they were doing. The biggest thing for me was the amount of delayed blitzes and line games and simulated pressures. It reminded me a little bit of that Mike McDonald feel where everything looked different every snap. And, they were using those linebackers as weapons to, pull the protection their way. And then they, once the protection pulled their way, they drop those guys and, eat up the middle of the field, kind of like that bailout technique we saw from Miami in that 2021 Thursday night football game. So, I think this is going to be a real challenge, especially for a young offensive line that is not just getting used to playing, but getting used to playing with each other. How's that communication going to work? How are they going to prepare, when they show blitz and then back everybody off? Are they going to be able to adjust? And that's without considering that they have two, real world beaters in Max Crosby and Christian Wilkins up front, who can just go out and win a one-on-one and completely ruin your day. So this is a big test for this offensive line.
Yeah, I liked a little bit I saw of their defense. I was watching that game earlier today, and Patrick Graham, their DC, people might remember he was the Dolphins DC in that 2019, that week 1 game. Obviously, that was not a great season for them. I think their defense ended up finishing dead last in points allowed. But to your point, different team, different group of players. Raiders defense last year, I think it was the second half of the season, weeks like 9 through 18, they led the league in points allowed.
Yep.
They were up there in sacks. They were up there in interceptions. So it's a solid group. But watching them against this Chargers team, man, I like what Patrick Graham was doing. I mean, his coverages, he's running 3, he's running 1, different variations of cover 2. They got Tampa, they got invert, he got 1 rat, he got 2 rat with a high hole and a low hole. They're doing all types of things. And then you talked about what they're doing up front. They're 3 down, primarily, I think, in base, but then they're running all types of line games, ETs, TEs, 6-man pressures, 5-man pressures, sims. They're doing everything out there, but it was cohesive. Right. Sometimes you can throw a bunch of stuff out there and like, oh, that sounds cool. Look at all this stuff. But it's like how I think about offense, right? Offense is a system, right? Plays complement each other. They build off of one another. It's not just a collection of plays. Same thing can apply to defense. It doesn't have to just be a collection of defensive calls. Those calls can complement one another and build off of one another. So I was watching, and you can just see.
Mike. Good ones do. I know the ones that gave me fits, they all complement each other.
Yeah. Because you can see some of those coverages when they're in Tampa 2, and then next time they come out in that same look and they roll a 3, and you can see how they complement. And you're like, okay, I see what we're trying to do here. Wow. So I like what I saw. I mean, I know they lost the game, gave up a couple long runs at the end. But if you watch that whole game, JK had like 26 yards in the first half. The run game, I want to say, had like under 40 yards in the first half. He hit those 2 long ones in like the third or fourth quarter, and that kind of really pumped things up. But yeah, I think this defense, man, because it all starts up front with those 2 guys you name, and they are coming. Mm-hmm. Crosby is coming all day. Wilkins is so extra, man. He just does so much extra stuff after the snap. He's pushing dudes and laying on dudes.
My wife don't know very many interior defensive linemen's names, but she knows him by what he did when they won the national championship.
He's so extra.
That darn split. After they won that championship, this man did a split, and my wife.
Your team, you love it. You love.
Oh, I'd love him if he was on our team.
Yeah,
you guys know
love
that.
all the extra stuff. But even the rest of that squad, I mean, their safeties, good young group. I think Morig and Marcus Epps, solid duo back there. The corners. Coach, you talk to Chris all the time. You know how he feels about Jack Jones. He's been a Jack Jones fan.
Robert Spillane is one guy that just really popped to me watching them in that front 7.
He's still him from the Steelers.
Spillane, one of them guys that's going to be where he's supposed to be. Going to be where he's supposed to be every play, and he's not going to miss tackles. Now you may out athlete him, but he's going to be where he's supposed to be, and he's not going to miss tackles.
Yeah, he reminds me of the guys the Chiefs had. I just watched, obviously a lot of Chiefs film, a lot of Seahawks film, a lot of Lions film this past week, and he reminds me of some of the really good inside. I'd say he fits in line with some of the guys who played really well in week 1. Mike, you're absolutely right, man. The defense was, for the Raiders, #1 scoring defense in the league from after their bye onward, whatever their bye was. Like you said, week 9, week 10.
When Pierce took over?
Correct. Pierce took over the week before the bye, I believe, after they lost to the Lions.
Okay.
So I believe there was one game there and then the bye, but I could be wrong. But yeah, and they play. I don't know about you guys, but when I was watching the J.K. Dobbins film, I kept thinking to myself, when are we going to get some good gains? like you said, it was 1 yard gain, 2 yard gain, 1 yard loss. And I kept looking at the rundown. I'm like, well, where are they? And then a couple of they had a 47, a 62. I think he had a 7 and a 12. Other than that, it was a whole bunch of 1s and 2s. I don't know what the percent was, but the overwhelming majority of his runs, even Gus to a certain extent, was 1 and 2 yard gains. They're very physical up front, and Spillane is incredibly underrated. I can't believe it's 2024, and we're worried about Robert Spillane again. But this is a dude that's just he's incredibly underrated, man, and he's stuck around. I think he's at like $5-6 million a year for them, maybe $7 million as far as salary. So like credit to him for being able to parlay that.
Yeah, I thought they just fit the run really well for the most part. Like you said, they had those handful of runs where maybe a guy got out of a gap, or credit to the Chargers O-line. Maybe they had some good blocks on a couple of those and they got creased. But for the most part, I thought people were where they were supposed to be. They were super physical. Like you said, you already know about Crosby and Wilkins, but this dude, 69, Adam Butler, kind of like a journeyman DT. Man, that dude, he play hard, man.
Yeah.
that man plays hard. So that's what you're going to get. And plus, that's Antonio Pierce. That's how he's built. So they're going to play hard. That. So yeah.
It would benefit us to be able to run the ball, right? It will benefit, and not saying that we can, but it would benefit us to be able to do so this week and face less plays with our defense. And
I think you got to get that run game going. That's got to be a priority. And I think Derrick Henry's got to be the focal point of that.
Can I ask a question?
Yeah.
The statement that Harbaugh made about Derrick not being here for 30 carries. How do you guys feel about that?
It's weird.
It was random.
Like sometimes you got to ignore John, man.
I don't know
some of the stuff that comes out of his mouth, man.
I don't know,
because he'll say some random. We don't care about the people at the end of the bar. He'll just say some random shit sometimes. You just
always makes me wonder, like, how many questions do these guys get answered? Like, we see snippets. I'm gonna use players as an example and parlay it to coaches. Like, sometimes you see players and they answer questions that are a little perturbed. And I would always say to people, I was actually a sports reporter for a while at a very low level. And I was like, hey, how many questions has he been asked? Has he been asked 15 questions and he's acting like this? I think that's kind of appropriate on his part. Now, if it's a second question, then he's just an asshole. So I kind of wonder the same thing about Harbaugh. Like, is that the 7th or 17th question? It caught me by surprise.
I think at this point, he pays attention too much. Like, I've noticed that in the last couple of years. I think he pays attention to some of the things people are saying in the media. And it's surprising to me because he doesn't really strike me as the kind of, and I mean, that was the whole point of the end of the bar comment. He's basically saying, y'all don't matter.
He can't be listening to him.
But right? At the same time, when you're saying y'all don't matter, it's almost like it matters. So, I mean, he's probably watching the live stream right now. What up, John?
What up, I wonder if he more so means early in the year. Early in the year, we don't want to overuse him, or early in games. Because I do wonder if against the Chiefs, our plan was to utilize him more in the second half. I suspect that. Can't prove it at all. So I wonder if he meant and just didn't explain it well.
What I think he meant was we're going to go game to game. There's going to be a game plan for each specific game. We're going to adjust to what the game is in front of us, how it's folding out. Like, we're not going to commit to running them. I just don't think it's one of those quotes where it's like, I don't know. I find sometimes these guys just get caught saying something that they probably didn't really intend, and then we dissect it. So if I had to put myself in his shoes and you go into his PR room, that's probably what I'm thinking is more. It was, we don't have a game plan to run 30 times. And I mean, that was the Titans offense, right? Like, he was the Titans offense. So they were running him 20 plus times unless shit really hit the fan at the start of the game.
I think if he runs 25 times, we win. I mean,
I want to see him hit 30. And I got him in fantasy, so I mean, I want to see him hit 35, maybe.
Put whatever number you want on it. We do what it takes to win.
The win,
That's it,
right?
Exactly.
If
That's
it
it.
takes 30 carries and that's what gets the win, then we'll do that. If
And
we
you know,
can do
one
it on
week it might
10,
be
then we'll
30 and
do
they
that.
win. One week it might be 10 and they
That's
win.
what I'm
Like
saying.
it's yeah.
Do
And
whatever it takes.
again, like I
If
think
that's
that's
the case, if
probably
that's
what
the
he
case,
meant.
Justin Hill should have had some carries then. He only had one.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It don't even have to be Derrick Henry 30 times. The running back position.
Yeah.
They need fundamentally, and I've said this for years, they need a run game outside of the Lamar Jackson option that is kind of their staple, that it's their identity. And I thought it was going to turn into that outside wide zone. You know, we saw with him in Tennessee. I thought they'd try and recreate that here. And, you know, they did a little bit of that last week for sure, you know, and they had a couple of really solid runs on that stretch zone. And so, maybe that's going to get there. We know that was Todd Monken's kind of staple concept at Georgia, and with Tampa Bay, as well as Cleveland.
Even Warhop. I think even Warhop has been in offenses where
Yep.
they've run more zone. I don't know if it's specifically outside or inside, but more zone than gap. I think we know Joe D that was his bread and butter, right? We coming at you.
So what's
and I
the
get that.
anomaly in this situation? Meet y'all with the Nelson Aguilar.
Well, if you're gonna call a spade.
All right. Well, we kept you folks around for 51 minutes, and I say to these guys every time we get together, we could go all night if we had to. So we're gonna cut it there. Huge thanks to you guys. Let's go around the horn and see what everyone's got coming up. Any videos that you guys have on tap, please highlight. Coach Evans, I'm gonna start with you.
I got videos coming left and right on my regular channel at Sip2Tally Films, on my second channel, more Sip2Tally, which is for the other 31 teams. Got previews coming out starting tomorrow, live stream Sunday during the game, watch party. So come over and do that with me. And I also have the call-in show shortly thereafter the game or Monday, and sometimes both. So come check me out. Sub if you're not.
And channel links down below. Go hit that sub button. Coach DC, anything you got on tap?
Mine is going to focus on Derrick Henry and kind of the run pass split with those guys. And I'm big on formation data. It's just the way that I was raised with the game. It's probably overly simplistic, but it's how I was introduced to the game, was to identify formations and then use the data from that formation to try to stop people. You know, it was my job. And I think we can't put data out there that's so like, what'd you say?
Defensive coach.
Exactly right.
Yeah.
I think we can't put data out there, you know, over a probably 3 or 4 game stretch that lines up with what we saw against the Chiefs, you know, in terms of the under center personnel data. I think, well, getting back to Andy Reid with 12 and 13 personnel, I think we've got to kind of use the data in our favor, you know, play a little bit of sleight of hand. And then I got a video I'm hopefully finishing up tonight on Terrion Arnold, the Lions rookie corner. I like him. He had his hands full last week against Demarcus Robinson, in fact.
From here.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah.
And MC, what about you, my guy?
Hey, you know me, I'm semi-retired at this point.
You're everywhere.
So everything drops unexpectedly like bird poop. You just never know when there'll be a deep cover, when there'll be a fire zone, when me and Coach are going to put out a bunch of film from a book that Bobby Peters wrote. You just never know when stuff is going to come out. With me, there's no schedule to it. So you kind of just got to always keep your eyes and ears to the street and look out for me and Unc on IG Live. You know, we'll be back.
Might want to watch the way you say that.
We're going to right those wrongs. We're going to right those wrongs.
We'll be back.
The system beat you to it.
And you guys know me. You're here. Road Graders with Cole Jackson. Hit that like button. Hit subscribe. That's all we have for you guys. Be good to yourselves. Be good to each other. Peace out, everyone.